I'm Dan Morris, you're watching Bosun Dan Bushcraft, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of axe throwing. You guys are once again joining me at a very frosty Madrenelin Activity Centre, and this wind, whoa, my word, a bit chilly on the old fingertips. So axe throwing is in itself an incredibly simple activity, really. The number one mistake that most people make with it is actually overthinking it, overcomplicating it, because there's really not that much thought in it. In fact, the most trickiest part of it is trying to mirror your throws, trying to keep them the same as each throw, keep the power the same and what you're doing the same, because really it's all about consistency. And at the point of when you're just starting to pick up axe throwing, it's more about consistency and distance from the target than anything else. So we're going to be starting with these lovely little three-bladed things, very rusty because they get a lot of use. Three-bladed means they're a lot easier to get them to stick in the first place, because you've obviously got three blades to do it with. One of the sort of biggest mistakes people make with these, particularly with the little jobbies, is the grip. Now, gripping them with just your fingertips and trying to flick them and stuff like that really doesn't work. You need a nice, full, solid grip on that handle there, because what you're trying to do is limit the amount of spin that you're putting into it. If you're throwing them with just your fingertips and giving it the old whippy, all that's happening there is you're putting a hell of a lot more spin in it. Now, spin equals inconsistency. Each throw is going to turn out to be different, and you're not going to have any control really over how it's going in. So you want to limit that spin. The same from the wrist. You're not flicking anything at all. Your wrist needs to be relatively locked in place, because all the spin required is going to come from that arm extending like that. Yeah, anything you do after that is going to equal overspin. And the strange thing about these, particularly with the smaller implements, is the more that you force spin into them, the more likely they are to turn around and land handle first. The throw itself is incredibly simple. It's exactly the same as anything you're throwing around on a day-to-day basis. Tennis ball for the dog, snowball, hand grenade, whatever it is day to day you might be sort of chucking about. Yeah, if I said to anybody, if I gave you a snowball, I use a snowball as an example because we've got snow and ice everywhere, but if I gave you a snowball and said, throw this snowball over there for me as far as you can, you wouldn't stand flat facing the direction, twist against yourself and go like that, or just use your arm. You'd get your throwing leg behind you, nice shoulder pull backwards, and launch the thing. Now it's exactly the same with an axe. Bit of shoulder movement and go. You don't have to throw it massively powerful with an axe to get it to stick in the log, to be fair. You really don't need to do that. It doesn't take all that much power. But that body swing, the shoulder movement, gives you power for free. If you just stand there and try and extend your arm faster and faster to get that power to make it stick in, two things are going to happen. Firstly, you're just going to add so much more spin into it, it becomes unreliable. Secondly, you're going to hit your elbow by the end of the day. So that little body turn is basically free power. So, as I already said just a moment ago, axe throwing more than anything is about distance. And what I mean by that is it's about finding the distance that, for how you're throwing, it's landing with the blade on the log. Now what we do here is usually start everybody about 3 meters back from the target. That's more for safety reasons, because these things generally, with the littler ones, they will land on a blade pretty much every meter. It's different for everybody because everybody's going to throw slightly differently. Sorry, I've got things tangled up around my wrist. It might be you're 1 meter and a bit or anything like that. But these things, for having 3 blades, are really useful for telling you what your distance is based on how they land. Now, if I throw these at bang on 3 meters, it'll land with the handle completely down like that, or a little down. So if I come back to my usual distance, which is just a little back from 3 meters, it should land on that center blade and be pretty much horizontal. If I go back even further still, it'll land on the other blade with the handle pointing all the way up. So there we go. First throw, handle's pointing down. Second throw, it's not quite perfectly horizontal, but it is on that center blade, and the handle's further out. And then third throw, when I was further away, handle's pointing completely upwards. So what these are telling you basically is where your distance should be. The general rule is if the handle's pointing all the way down, you need to go further back and it'll come there. If the handle's pointing all the way up, you need to go closer to your target and that will bring it down there. Okay, that's if you want to get it on that center blade. For most people, you're not going to be bothered. As long as it sticks into your log, you'll be perfectly happy. But as a general rule, if it's landing with the handle touching your log, that's when you need to make an adjustment, because that one's telling you now you need to go further back. And if you don't, what will happen is if you throw inconsistently or you go any closer to the target, it's going to land on the handle and fall on the floor like that. Now, from a point of safety with this sort of thing, health and safety wise, whether you're doing it at an activity centre like here with us at Madrenalin, or if you've just got yourself a log and you've bought some of these and you're doing it in your own backyard, when you're collecting your axes back up, if you've usually got some that are fallen out that are on the ground, but always take them out of your logs first before you pick up the ones on the floor. And that is simply because quite often they'll drop on you when you're underneath there rummaging around picking them up. Or the other favourite, which is usually quite a bit worse, is if you're down there scrumming around picking up your axes and you forget they're sticking in a log, you then stand up, ow, straight into the head or anywhere else. And these, they're not particularly sharp. We don't sharpen them. They don't need massively sharp live edges to stick into the logs. They just don't. But with them being metal and skin being skin, sharp or not, they will cut you if you stand up into one. Now, another safety concern when you're doing anything like this, well, this is a pretty obvious one, but obviously naturally being aware of your surroundings, anybody who's around you. But these things, particularly if you miss or you get a handle shot, they can bounce back, and you'd be surprised just how far they can travel. And as I always say to people, don't try and catch them. I mean, what you guys do personally in your own backyards is your business, but please don't try and catch them unless you're really, really good, because obviously with them having 3 blades, they are almost always spinning when they come back, and it is surprising sometimes. It's quite rare, but it's surprising just how far these things really can travel when they come whipping back. But that really is about all there is to it with the littler things. It is just time and practice, keeping your throws as consistent as you can. So trying to keep your power and your motion the same, and then finding that distance. I get asked a lot all the time, so when you see it in movies and they just grab and go and all that, that's not possible. No, of course it is. It's absolutely possible. But the stories of Vikings running around doing stuff like that is based on people who were doing this day in, day out. They'd do it for fun when they were drinking, they'd do it for competitions and a bit of gambling and all of that sort of stuff. This advice is for when you're just starting out, when you're just getting used to it. Now, once you get properly used to it, you will pretty much be able to visualize what your distance is and then correct your throw accordingly. But at beginner level, there's no way you're going to be able to do that, and it's not something that can be explained to you like, oh, just move your arm a little here, a little there, a little the other. The key things to remember is your distance, finding your right distance, and then letting the blade itself tell you whether you need to go back or forward. So always remember with axe handles, if the handle's all the way down, that's telling you to go backwards a bit. Okay. Now the correction distance might not always be much. It could be 6 inch or so, something like that. I know I was working in meters earlier. I'm forever doing that, jumping in between metric and imperial. Ooh, quite snappy. So as I said, or as I've said a few times now, distance is key. So that front post down there is 3 meters. this one's about 6. So as I said, with distance being the thing, if it works at 3 meters, it'll work at 6. But I know that I'm from this point a little further back. So if you are a little further back at one distance, you'll be exactly the same at the next, yeah? Now, of course, there are all sorts of throwing implements out there on the market. Here's a different one, the throwing knives. Now, throwing knives are, in my opinion, very tricky and a little bit unruly, particularly with these style. Now, as a general rule of thumb, the longer the throwing knife, the easier they are to actually use, and that comes down to spin control. Shorter versions, and you can get them much shorter than this, even more so, but the shorter the throwing knife, the more that they spin, the faster they spin, and then the more your absolute consistency is going to come into it. It's taken me quite a while to be able to get anywhere with these things, so they could do with being just a touch longer. But as a word of caution with knives, I don't know if it's because they're lighter or what, but if anything is going to bounce back to you, it'll be a knife. The larger equipment doesn't seem to be quite as bouncy, but little things like these little throwing knives, they really do have a bounce on them. So again, if you're doing this in your backyard, make sure they're not flying over neighbours' gardens, and make sure nobody's standing around in silly places, because these are the ones that can really catch you out. Well, that worked, but the first one really didn't have much accuracy about it. Now, the technique with these is really similar to the first one. It's the same sort of throw, pretty much the exact same throw. Weirdly, these do seem to like a little bit more speed. I don't know what that's about. Now, with larger things like hatchets, and this is a very simple hatchet, it's a pretty standard hatchet really, and I always get that like, so what's the difference between a throwing axe and an axe? Nothing. A throwing axe is an axe that you choose to throw. And you might be duped when you're shopping for such things, all these fancy words, and like, no, there's no difference. An axe is an axe. If you're throwing it, it's a throwing axe. And then you do get all these people on about things being perfectly balanced and la-di-da. It makes no difference. Once you get used to it as an implement, it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. But what will make things like this different than the little things like the Angels that I showed you is obviously these are overbalanced. Balance goes from the head onwards, and they are longer. Now, you need to hold them right at the very base of the handle. Your brain might tell you that you've got more spin control if you're higher up on the handle. You don't. The higher up on the handle you hold it, the faster it spins, and the more likely it is handle and fall off. Yeah? With these, your distance will be different than the smaller implements. You will be further back, and you probably need to find which specific distance is yours. These you'll get a bit less information out of them, literally, because a wrong throw, it won't be on a different blade, it'll just be on the floor, won't it? So, and another thing with these is they really don't require power to throw. The calmer you are with them, generally the better they work for you. And with them having all that extra weight behind them, get them airborne and let them do the work for you. You need to make sure though that when you let it go, that blade is facing forwards, yeah? Because if that blade is twisted to one side or the other, that is obviously not going to work. The throw itself is literally just get it airborne and let the weight do the work for you. Like that. And you can see there, I didn't put an enormous amount of effort into that. It was literally just in the air and away. It's a bit rubbish, it's just hanging on the log. Now obviously with these being different, aiming is a whole different bucket of frogs because they fly completely different than the smaller equipment. So the bigger stuff, much the same as the littler stuff, On distance, it's the same thing really. If you want to go further back, ideally you want to be like doubling your distance. There is ways in between, there is distances in between, but you've got to find that, and it will be different for everybody. And then once you get used to that, and you fancy a bit of a challenge with the hatchets, try the underarm throw. Keep your blade facing forward, keep your palm, so the actual hilt of the handle's in your palm, because to throw it that way, you need to have a little bit more of a flick to it, because you're trying to send it completely all the way over. There's no promises this is going to work, this is usually 50-50, so have a go. A little high. It's in, but not on the target. Oh! Now, the same with the big ones as the little ones. If you've got them on the floor, take them out the log first so they don't drop on your head. And that is pretty much all there really is to say to get you going on axe throwing. It is all pretty simple stuff really. A little piece of advice though, with the wooden handled axes, as opposed to storing them and using them and things like that, usually if you go out and buy something with a wooden handle, and as you probably know from my other videos, my axes have timber handles, and I have personally made handles for them myself and replaced them. They don't last forever. And when you buy something like this from a shop or anywhere, you tend to find that they've sat in a warehouse somewhere and dried out, and obviously the process of lobbing them at things can be quite violent and put quite a bit of pressure on them, and they will tend to snap the heads off. To make them much less likely to do that, you can either soak the axe, just the head, the whole head I mean, all the way in to about there, in either water or cooking oil, vegetable oil, something like that. That will soak into the wood, soften them up, keep them quite a bit more flexible, make it a lot less likely that you're going to be snapping axe heads off. So something to think about there. And again, with the hatchets, a relative edge. I mean, they're fairly pointy, they're not brutally sharp, they just don't need to be. But then a lot of the time with the sort of lower priced axes, they'll be really blunt, so you will want to run some sort of sharpness on them. And I've touched on this before with grind quality. When you pay less for an axe or a knife, you'll usually find that it's not ground brilliantly, because that takes time, and obviously whoever's manufacturing them, if they've spent hours and hours grinding it and faffing with it, they're not going to be able to sell it for a low price. Woo! So that, for this level of axe throwery, is really just about all I need to say to get you going. So if you are going to try that, please be safe, be aware of your surroundings. Alternatively, if you wish to come and do some axe throwing, you can come and do it with me personally, right here at the Madrenelin Activity Centre. But if you're just going to go to the woods and start lobbing them about, please be safe and consider other people, dog walkers or whatever's going on. And remember what I've said about them bouncing off and all of that sort of stuff. But that is all I need to really tell you about this subject at this level. So as always guys, thanks for watching. Get out there, get bushcrafting, be safe and have fun. Bosun Dan out.